Let's see, time now is 7:43. More than 100 new fracking licences are expected to be granted this lunchtime, less than a day after MPs voted to allow drilling for gas underneath national parks.
The controversial decision means that fracking can now take place in protected areas across the country. Our environment correspondent Claire Marshall can tell us more.
This is the edge of the Peak District National Park. Now, in January, the government said it was going to ban outright fracking in places like this. And then in July, it changed its mind. So you could potentially have rigs positioned here and then pipelines running down 1,200 metres underneath my feet, several miles into the national park in order to extract the gas.
Well, Claire Marshall reporting there for the Peak District. Joining us now from central London is Ken Cronin, the Chief Executive of UK Onshore Oil and Gas. Here in the studio is energy campaigner Donna Hume from Friends of the Earth. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
It's a very emotive debate. It's a scientific debate too. When you see an image of a national park or a beautiful area like that and you think of the issue of mining beneath, it prompts a lot of thoughts. Just can you give us the essence of your objections to what was announced yesterday?
Sure. Well, what's happened is the government's gone back on its promise for an outright ban in national parks. And also they've gone back on their promise to not frack near the places where we get our drinking water from. And we're really concerned that the government is actually putting the interests of the fracking companies ahead of people's concerns.
And are you unconvinced by the technical restrictions around the mining process, that the mine itself will be outside of the national park, the drilling will be done beneath, it will not affect the surface area?
Definitely. I mean, we could see fracking rigs all around some of our most beautiful places, really impacting on our landscape. I spoke to someone from North Dakota recently, who I met at the Paris climate change talks, and she said if you stand on the top of a hill near where she lives and look around, do a 360 turn, it looks like a war zone with the flaring and the fires happening from the fracking everywhere.
Okay, Ken Cronin, Chief Executive UK Onshore Oil. You've heard Donna's comments there, the concerns that many people have about their environment. What would you say in reaction to that?
Good morning, Naga. I mean, I agree with Donna that the environment is very, very important. We've been extracting oil and gas onshore for well over 100 years. In the last 50 or 60 years, we've drilled over 2,000 wells in and around national parks. Some of our largest sites are actually in national parks. This is a very, very heavily regulated industry. We have 4 separate regulators that have separate oversights on the drilling process, the way we actually drill, the environmental impacts, and also the local impacts. To date, we've had a very successful operations with both the environment and the communities involved.
The problem is with this industry is it is still relatively new compared to oil exploration, gas exploration of more traditional type. So how can we be sure? Shouldn't there be a more open mind? I suppose that's, Donna, that's what you're suggesting, when it comes to this, and be willing to compromise on safety standards and perhaps even be more highly regulated before embarking on this big project in the UK?
I think the operations that we do have been going on for well over 50 years. The fracking technique was first used in the UK about 50 years ago. This is a very, very highly regulated industry with 4 separate regulators. We have to go through a planning consent, we have to go through an environmental permitting consent to get 8 environmental permits connected to 17 EU directives. We have to get our well design and our well creation approved by the Health and Safety Executive, and also then it's a complete oversight by the Oil and Gas Authority. It is the most highly regulated industry in this country. So,
Donna, when you hear that list of the red tape, the hoops they have to jump through, where's the flaw? Why is that not secure enough?
Well, I think that Ken knows that the fracking that he's proposing happens in Britain now is very different from the fracking that's been happening, or a very different process to what he's talking about that's happened for decades. Fracking, as we're talking about now, has only happened once in Britain 4 years ago, because everywhere it's proposed, it's opposed.
Give me what do you think, because we know at lunchtime today these licenses will go through. What's the worst possible scenario? What do you see as the worst thing that could happen as a result?
Well, one of the most important things, in addition to the threat to people's drinking water, which I think is one of the biggest risks experts have said, and also it is a real argument to say this is not properly regulated if we're allowed to frack near where people get drinking water that goes to their homes from. But also, perhaps even more important than that, and a really big risk, is climate change. If we had fracking take place across the country, What does that mean for the Paris climate deal that was agreed just days ago?
Ken, can you guarantee that these concerns can be offset by a significant increase in the amount of energy production that is being proposed from these new fracking projects?
I think the first thing to say is that some of the risks that Donna has mentioned have been reviewed by people like the Royal Society, Royal Academy of Engineering, and they have sort of talked about the risks being low to minimal. In terms of the actual climate change talks in Paris, I think it's really, really important to say that actually most predictions show gas is actually going to increase as we replace coal. I think the other thing we should also acknowledge is the fact that we have a very high dependency on gas, and in particularly foreign imported gas in this country.
Ken Cronin, thank you very much for your time this morning, and Donna Hume from Friends of the Earth, thank you for your time as well.
11 minutes to 8.